He was one of the best coaches in college football history, former coach at Northwestern, more known for Notre Dame, Ara Parseghian. How you doing, Ara?
Well, I'm doing fine.
So, Ara, what did you have more fun doing, coaching Northwestern or Notre Dame?
What? That's a question?
We'll throw in Miami. We'll throw in Miami of Ohio too.
I'll let you answer it for me.
I'll tell you what, though, you had some great teams there at Northwestern in the early '60s.
Oh, absolutely. No, we had good football teams, but the problem, being a private school and a state-oriented conference with high admission requirements and so forth, created a depth problem for us. We would get started off, I think a couple of years, we went 6-0, and injuries created huge problems for us in the latter part of the season.
So Pat Fitzgerald has been fairly successful following in your footsteps, although those were pretty long ago footsteps.
Oh, he's done a great job. I'm impressed with him. I was up there. They had a reunion last year. It was a Michigan State game, and they had a lot of the players back from the 8 years that I had coached there. And it was sort of startling for me when I got the list. They had about 75 or 80 players coming back. And then when I looked at the deceased list, there's 39 guys that were gone. And 2 months later, it was 41. So it's kind of a startling for a coach that's had all these players through all these years and to see the number that have moved on.
Notre Dame seems to like those Miami of Ohio coaches. I mean, they had another one in between you and Fitzgerald getting the job, and Randy Walker, and he was pretty successful.
Yeah, well, they also had John Pont, but he wasn't successful. So the cradle of coaches, though, has delivered a lot of coaches around the country, and Randy Walker was a good coach, and he would have had the misfortune of the heart attack. I think he would have set some extraordinary records if he could have continued on.
Okay. Now, way back when you were at Miami of Ohio, you were the freshman coach. Woody Hayes was the main coach. Did you learn what not to do as well as some of what to do?
Well, he had a temper, I'll say that. He was a guy that was 98% a good guy, and 2% he was a bad guy, and the 2% he operated in vision of 98% of the people that were watching him. So he had a situation where he would lose his temper and do things that he was criticized for, but he would do it in the forum of a huge big stadium on television.
And when you went to Notre Dame, you found some good talent in John Hurt and Jack Snow here. I mean, both of them were contenders for the Heisman back in around '64.
Yes, no, that was the first year, and Notre Dame was hungry for some success, and I found some good football players here, and got them out on the field, and we moved a number of people into positions to make us the best football team we could have, and a lot of them made All-American. And it was a matter of getting the spark plugs hooked up again and letting the motor operate.
Now, how surprising was it when you're at Northwestern and all of a sudden Notre Dame comes calling? No,
Notre Dame didn't come calling. I called them.
And they answered, at least.
Yes. No, I was surprised. I had no intentions of leaving Northwestern, and then we had a little bit of a squabble with the athletic director and so forth, and I had decided I would move on. And I had seen that Notre Dame had named Huey DeVore as an interim coach, and I wanted to see whether or not they were contemplating a change. And basically, I called Father Joyce and said, if you're contemplating a change in your coaching, head coaching, I said, I'd like to throw my hat in the ring. And if not, I said, disregard the phone call. And he didn't say no, he didn't say yes, but he indicated an interest and said he would keep in touch with me if he would continue the interest. And shortly thereafter, a telephone call came, and that started the ball rolling for my ultimate acceptance and the head coaching job at Notre Dame.
Being a coach at Notre Dame, is that probably the most difficult coaching position in the whole college football?
I didn't realize how the magnitude of Notre Dame until I sat in the chair. You can only appreciate the significance of it by being the head football coach at Notre Dame and the national or almost international aspect of it. I mean, when I was at Northwestern, I would get calls from, say, 500-mile radius, and but when I took the job at Notre Dame, rather, I mean, it was east, west, I mean, coast to coast, north, south, coast to coast. I mean, it was just unbelievable. It was surprising, but when you take an institution, a good academic institution with a religious affiliation and a great football tradition, it commands a lot of national attention.
Has the nature of coaching changed since when you last coached? It seems media savviness, dealing with recruits, things like that, almost supersede X's and O's.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. I think that the coaches of today have the necessity of maintaining a relationship with the media, and the media can be very intrusive at times. And you're right about the recruiting. That's the thing has gotten out of hand, in my personal opinion. I think that when you bring the freshmen in, I tried to low-key it because they're going to have enough of an adjustment, social, academic, and athletic, when they came in as freshmen. And they build all these kids up. They have great high school records, and you know that only about a third of them are going to make it. And so from that standpoint, it becomes a very difficult job. You have communities involved and parents involved and family members and so forth. That I think there's always been a lot of demand on the football coach because it's a 24-hour, 12-month job, and it's gotten even more difficult for the coaches of today.
When you were coaching at Notre Dame, you had some great quarterbacks. You had Joe Theismann, and you recruited Joe Montana. Did you ever dream that Joe Montana would become the great quarterback he did in the NFL?
No, I knew he was great, and just to show you how smart I was, we recruited Joe. He was a freshman my last year. Then I retired.
If you known he was going to be that good, you would have lasted a couple more.
Isn't that one of the great moves?
Well, Dan Devine appreciated it.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure he did.
Because he was playing Rusty Lish over him, I believe. Because wasn't Rusty Lish his starting quarterback over Montana?
Yeah. Well, I think he was having a personality problem with Montana, from what I understand, and benched him, I guess, in the early part of his career with Devine, and then ultimately put him in the game when he had gone down to his third quarterback, and Joe bailed him out of some game. I can't recall which one it was, and then from then on, obviously, showed the quality of quarterback that he was.
Now, at Notre Dame, there's something of a, I don't know, controversy is the right word, but the coach Brian Kelly spewing profanity, being shown on television and all that stuff. Shouldn't he realize coming in that if that's part of his personality, he might have to tone it down slightly?
Yeah, I think he regrets it. I would guess. I haven't talked to him. I imagine he regrets. He wasn't aware that he was that visible on TV. And when you get on national TV, I mean, that as I mentioned, I became much aware of the national aspect of Notre Dame. And yeah, I think he has learned a lesson. I think he's gotten enough attention from the media and fans and administration, I would guess, to tone it down. And I'm sure that he will, because I've had discussions with him and have found him to be a very reasonable person.
You were a Presbyterian. You went to a Catholic university. Did your religion have any effect on you getting hired? Did Notre Dame ever say, you know what, we want a Catholic coach, or they never even talked about your religion?
Not zero. They never. I don't think they wanted me. I swear they never asked me to join the church or anything.
Because isn't Mass an important part? Because I heard on TV that before every game the players all attend Mass, and then
that's one thing. That's exactly right. All the players attend Mass. I attended every Mass, and I insisted on some of the players, if they overslept or did anything that they didn't show up, I made sure that this was a part of the tradition that I was a part of myself because I was head coach. And I went to Mass on a regular basis, even though I was a Presbyterian.
Hey, it never hurts.
Nope.
Of all the teams you coached, what was your favorite one?
Oh, that's so hard to, we had 2 national championship teams, and 1966 and 1973, and then we had an undefeated team up until, as a matter of fact, we were having the 1966 50th or 45th reunion, Michigan State Week, which is a week and a half away or less. And that team is coming back. This is a team that unfortunately has lost 2 of the great players on the team. Jim Seymour, the split end, passed away as a result of cancer. And Pete Duranko, who was just a great athlete, passed away just recently from ALS. So there'll be a little mourning when the team comes back, but a whole group of them are coming back. They're very close knit. They were a close-knit team, and it was one of the great teams that I had. And the 73 team, which was a national championship team, was an unexpected. We thought we were a year away because we had freshmen that came in and played a very important part. As a matter of fact, I started, I think, 4 or 5 freshmen that contributed immensely to the success that we had in that 1973 season.
Wasn't Bubba Smith on that Michigan State team too?
Bubba Smith was playing on Michigan State team, exactly.
And he just passed away within the last month, I remember.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I saw that. You're right.
He was such a player. What about people who ask you, did you play for a tie in that game?
I mean, well, go back if you want to go back and look at the play-by-play and see whether I played for a tie. I mean, it's, there's been unusual criticism, and how can you criticize a team that won the national championship?
I can't. I just want one here.
But I mean, the very fact that we decided at the end we had our starting quarterback was on the sideline, our starting center was on the sideline, our starting running back, Nick Eddy, was on the sideline. So we had Hanratty, Nick Eddy, Rocky Blyer, our center, our defensive, and the backup, Bob Glasgow. We had a lot of injuries in that game, and now you're back on your own 30-yard line. People would, a lot of people don't know that on 4th down and 1 from our own 39-yard line, that we went for the first down. And you got to remember that Michigan State kicked me the ball. They decided they weren't going to go for it. They were in their own territory. But in any event, yes, at the time that it occurred, I felt it was a very unjust criticism. But that's part of the game. And just as I've told you, I said, if I would have made a dumb mistake and they had a great kicker, they had the wind with them, and we had lost by a field goal in the last 20 seconds of the game, then I would have been the dumbest coach in America.
Now, in your list of favorite games, where does that 10-10 tie rate?
Well, I've never been involved in a college game that had as much pregame buildup. I mean, it was more like a Super Bowl when you see all the publicity and all the importance that the media gives the Super Bowl game. This was a little like that. We had press conferences every day. I thought, what are we going to tell them today? I mean, we've been telling them basically the same thing because there's not that much going on. We were of course, practicing at our stadium, not our stadium, but our practice fields at Michigan State because we were going to play up there. But we had press here, they had press there, and it was a daily occurrence. And they started to write about this game because they were looking at the schedules 3 or 4 games before it occurred. And both of us were, I think, Duffy and I were both saying, let this alone until we get there, because you've got to focus on the game that you're playing, and that might have been a problem for Notre Dame in the first half of last Saturday.
Your last game coaching or attempting to coach was that All-Star game at Soldier Field that got canceled because of the severe weather. I was surprised they didn't stop the game last week because of the weather being so bad.
That was amazing. I mean, It was, I think it was in the third quarter. There was still a little time left to go in the third quarter. But I remember it was a torrential rain. The rain was going sideways. Lightning was flashing. They stopped it. Everybody got off the field except some nuts that were out there. Were sliding up and down on the field and climbing those metal posts while lightning was flashing. And how vividly I remember that, what nutcases they were.
Public school kids.
But anyway, that's the only game that I was involved with where it was canceled.
Okay. Did you have a favorite coach to coach against?
I don't necessarily mean a favorite coach, but teams that everywhere that I was, when I was the various different stops that I had, Miami and Northwestern and Notre Dame, there was a team on our schedule that was either a traditional rival or a team that didn't necessarily, not necessarily a traditional rival, that gave me fits. And I think if you talk to coaches, if I'll give you an example, Ohio State playing at Wisconsin. They've been knocked off I don't know how many times. When I was at Miami of Ohio, Cincinnati was my nemesis. When I went to Northwestern, believe it or not, my nemesis was Wisconsin. We beat Ohio State, we beat Michigan, we beat Oklahoma, we beat Notre Dame. We couldn't beat Wisconsin. And when I'm at Notre Dame here, of course, Southern Cal was my nemesis. If we came within 3 more national championships that they knocked us out of. We were undefeated in 1964, 1970, and got knocked off by Southern Cal, and we were undefeated.
I want to ask you about Rudy. How much of that movie was true with your relationship with Rudy? Did you promise to play him his senior year?
Yes, I promised him he would get into the game. They took some liberties, of course, in the movie, but the basic theme of it is correct. I mean, he was not qualified academically. He didn't have all the credentials yet. He wasn't qualified really athletically, but he was more than qualified with determination. And he came into my office as it's depicted, and I thought he was a student, and we let walk-ons come onto our campus and play, and providing they're big enough they can protect themselves. And he came in and I was ready to have him come out as a walk-on and ask him, what courses he was taking and so forth. And he says, I'm not in school. And that's when he said he was going over to Holy Cross to get qualified to come to Notre Dame. I says, well, when you get through at Holy Cross, come over, we'll give you a uniform. And that's the way that all started.
What's it like having your own statue at Notre Dame?
Well, to be perfectly honest with you, I was opposed to it. As a matter of fact, I thought it's premature. I mean, when I'm gone, if you want to do something, you go ahead and do anything. But while I'm here, I was opposed to it. And then they finally came with the picture of the conclusion of the Cotton Bowl, which they're carrying me off the field. And they kept pressing. They wanted to do this statue thing. Pete Chivarelli was the mover and the shaker. He's out of Chicago there, as a manager of the band Chicago. And there's 3 guys that are carrying me off. And I said, well, that's what I approved because I did not want to be a statue alone. I wanted, and that characterized what I was hoping for would be a football players a part of the statue. And so from that standpoint, I'm not regretful now that I went ahead and approved it.
One last thing. Ellie and I used to host a show with former Chicago Bear Robin Earl, and Robin said his college choices were down to Washington and Notre Dame back in like 72, 73. He said, you're recruiting him. I go, Robin, you going to Washington would be the dumbest thing anyone ever did. Who turns down Ara and Notre Dame?
Wait a minute, I didn't quite follow the Washington bit.
Oh, he grew up in Seattle in Washington, and he was between Washington for college and Notre Dame. You were recruiting him, and so was the Washington coach at that time.
Yeah.
Owens, I believe it was, and he picked Washington over Notre Dame. I said, Robin, your life would be completely different now. No one turns down Notre Dame. If you're at Notre Dame, they love you here in Chicago.
Yeah, no, just like I said, when you become a part of it, as I did as a coach, and you sit in that chair, and you become aware of the attraction that Notre Dame has. When you have a religious affiliation, as I mentioned, and a great academic institution, and a great football tradition. Before I went in to become the head coach there, Notre Dame hadn't had a winning season in 5 years. I mean, they've had their cycles, and I really think that Brian Kelly is the beginning of a cycle. Unfortunately, last Saturday was one of those games that every coach faces at some time in his career. If you've been in the business long enough, you're going to have a game like that, a game where everything goes wrong and you can't explain it. Coaches can't control the officials. They can't control the weather. They can't control the injuries. They try to control the turnovers, but they can't control those. There's so many things that a coach can't do as well prepared as you'd like to have your team. And then they'll go out like they did last Saturday in the first half and made a multitude of mistakes. And these were not just rookies. These were seniors that had been around a while. So that's the unpredictability of coaching, and that's why I guess the gamblers make a lot of money.
Thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Okay, you bet.
Thank you.